Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. So glad you guys could join us once again. For those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and on X, we're glad that you all could be a part of our conversation for today. I'm going to go ahead and connect with our friends over on Instagram so they can be a part of our chat too. And last but certainly not least, we're going to connect with our friends over on Amazon so we can introduce you guys to today's guest. I think this is going to be one that all of you will appreciate. She has a brand new release out that's already an Amazon bestseller. And we welcome you guys tuning in on Amazon Live for Cyrus Webb Presents. If you guys are new to us on Amazon, make sure you guys hit that follow button. You'll see that they're here in this corner or down below. You also will see the book by our next guest. We're so excited to welcome Joanna Sokol to our broadcast today. She's the author of this best-selling book, A Real Emergency. As you guys can see there on Amazon, you guys can get it in print or the Kindle edition. I want to talk to Joanna not only about what it's been like for her to share her own personal story, but also to be able to let us into an industry that we don't always hear from, but definitely impacts all of us. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure you guys do put those in the chat. Joanna, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm really excited to be here.
Look, the pleasure is definitely all mine. Well, as I mentioned, your book is already an Amazon bestseller. At the time we're having this conversation today, Joanna, I'm going to pull it up for our audience here. You actually are number one right now in the emergency section of Amazon. There it is, new releases in emergency medicine, number one there. How does it feel to be able to see the response to the book already?
It is bananas. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I've been very overwhelmed this week. I still kind of feel like I'm holding my breath. The book's only been out for 1 week. And so it really hasn't sunk in yet that it's already getting this kind of response.
And this book, I was saying to you before we went on, and for our audience to know, I always love to tell them about for myself. When I was first pitched the book, I was excited about it because I'm always interested in learning more about people, why they do what they do, and how their jobs, their lives are impacted by what they do. It was so interesting. Of course, I didn't know you before, Joanna, but I feel like we get more into your why, but also what it's like for you to be able to do what you've committed yourself to. What was it like for you to reflect on as you were writing the book, the why of why you got into the profession that you did and the impact it's had on your life?
It's really interesting. That's kind of a big question. I've kept notes and journals the whole time that I was doing this work. I've always just been a note taker and a journaler. It's kind of how I ground myself and interact from the world. So very, very early on, I would go through a really intense experience. And then I'd be sitting there, sometimes in the back of the ambulance, sometimes at 4 a.m. Sometimes I'd get home just like sweating out caffeine from the day and writing down all the things that had happened to me. And so very early on, I had those experiences of just chronicling this crazy world that I was seeing. And as my career went on, and as the book writing went on, I started to want to expand that a little bit. And instead of just talking about my own experiences, I wanted to try to tell a story of what it's like to do this work. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it. I think there's a lot of confusion about it. And it was really important to me to include other voices other than my own. I interviewed other EMTs and paramedics. I went back into history a little bit. And so in terms of what it was like for me to reflect, it was really fascinating because you mentioned when we were chatting before the show what it's like to just be so involved in doing this work that you really don't have time to sit back and reflect. When I was really, really in it, it was about 14 years that I was fully involved in EMS. I kept journals, but I never really reflected on the why. I didn't have time. I was working too much. The experiences were too intense. And so last year, I was actually able to take a year off and just work on the book. And it was really, really interesting for me to try to look back and reflect on all these experiences from like a desk where I had time to sit and think and go for walks and use the bathroom and a lot of the sections I rewrote, 30, 40, 50 times as I had more perspective. And I was able to take steps back and then reread it and really think about what these experiences were like. And some of the experiences, it really changed them for me. I guess a lot of people go through that during therapy when you re-talk through an experience and you remember more details from it. And all of a sudden, 8 years after it happens, sometimes I would suddenly just start sobbing. And it was like, oh, I guess I did still, something that I thought I had processed and been through and thought about you would just find some new detail or remember some perspective of it that would suddenly shift the experience entirely. And so it was really intense. It was really transformative is kind of a cheesy word, but it's one we can apply here. The experiences changed as I remembered them and as I wrote about them.
Right. I think even in the title of the book, A Real Emergency, as you mentioned the chorus, being able to be in a situation where not only the lives of others is at stake, Joanna, but what I thought about, again, we don't always on the outside think about that you put your life in danger too. I mean, because what you're doing is actually very physical work.
Yeah.
Mentally, it can be draining. And I was telling you about an experience I had in interviewing someone, who was in EMS, and them being able to talk about their experience during COVID. Were there moments, even in reflecting on this, that you had wow moments of what you actually had gone through yourself?
Oh yeah, completely. Um, my editor for the book is a very close friend of mine. We've known each other a long time.
Hmm.
And sometimes I would send her stuff that seemed normal to me at the time, you know?
Hmm.
And suddenly seeing other people's reactions who aren't involved in the work. And my favorite reaction by far that I've had to the book so far was one of the early readers I sent copy to, Stephanie Griess. She's an incredible writer. Basically wrote back and said, "Jesus fucking Christ, are you okay?"
Mm.
Which was just hilarious because I was like, yeah, I'm fine. This is my job. This has been my life all this time.
Yeah.
And so to get to your question, to the ways that I saw things in a new way, I'm trying to remember the exact words of the last part of your question right now.
Yeah. Just the wowness of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so one of the things that it was very important for me to talk about in the book is people talk about how we risk our lives, right?
Hmm.
And we do. We occasionally get into situations where there's assaults, where there's gunfights, where there's fires. But one of the big things that we do that I think people don't always recognize is every day that we're out there, there's a wear and tear on your body.
Right.
That's really unavoidable. And it's not very dramatic. It's not Hollywood. It's not sexy. It's not because I'm pulling a baby out of a burning building. It's because I had to go upstairs, physically pick up a person, carry them down the stairs, load them into an ambulance, unload them out of the ambulance, and then do it again and again and again, 10 times a day, 12 times a day. And we're driving around during the shifts. Unlike firefighters who get stations to hang out and rest before calls, in some rural areas, EMTs and medics have stations, but in most urban systems, we don't actually have stations. We just drive around in the vans all day for 12 hours, and the seats don't go back very far. And the leg room is all taken up by equipment. And so you're really putting your body at risk every day, not because of some like sexy, exciting, dramatic rescue, but just because of the grind of the work.
Yeah.
You're just sitting in this uncomfortable position. You're crawling through bedrooms. You're picking people up at messed up angles. If it's 3 a.m. and our patient is really, really heavy and they're stuck behind the toilet, we can't be like, never mind. Like it's too late. Or like, let me do my stretches first. We still got to get them up out of there.
Yeah.
And so it's just really, really hard on your body physically. And of course it's hard on you emotionally. The job just wears you down over time,
Right.
and no matter how superhuman you try to be, over time, you're going to get joint problems. You're going to get sleeping problems. You're going to get stomach problems. You're going to get mental health problems. It just builds up, no matter who you are.
You had written something in the book. I want to actually read this, Joanna, because I thought it was really interesting. I made a note of it. And as you were talking, I thought about it. A conversation with Mikey that you recorded in the book. And I want to read a bit of what he said and what your thoughts were after that. In the section from Mikey, you wrote, Mikey takes his last bite of flan, says that's going to ruin his diet, and continues, a doctor at an urgent care that doesn't want to make a decision, security at a casino with a drunk guy being problematic, a care home killed someone and is panicked and doesn't want to deal with it, a homeless guy is shouting on the street corner, call 911. He looks down at the city. Call us whatever you want. We are the make the problem go away button. And I thought about that. And again, as I was reflecting before I even got to this part, about the whole idea of what was called in this chapter true emergencies. The title of the book again is A Real Emergency. What was it like for you to think about? Because one of the things you voice is your frustration with kind of, I think, some of the things that you all were doing, even though for the person you're doing it for, it may seem a whole lot bigger. What was it like for you to kind of think about what an emergency situation was and who defined what that was, Joanna?
That's such a great question. And the fact that you picked that passage out just means so much to me. I feel like you really got what I was trying to say with the book. That's really wonderful. So one of the big themes of the book, and the reason we ended up calling it A Real Emergency, is that people call 911 for all kinds of reasons. 911 is fast, and we always come. We do not refuse service, right? When you call 911 in America, we don't take your credit card number first. We don't have you pass a test. We just send someone. And so what that means is that the vast majority of our calls are not actually for those like really exciting life or death, scary, critical Hollywood emergencies. Most of our calls are minor medical issues. It's the elderly, it's the homeless, it's chronic medical issues, mental illness. We end up going on those calls the vast majority of the time. And it's something that's really interesting to deal with as a paramedic, because on the one hand, you're trained in school for this like really exciting life or death, like, oh my God, the guy's not breathing. We got to start CPR. We got to drop an airway. And then you get out there and your first 100 calls are, oh, grandma's got a tummy ache. We couldn't get a hold of her doctor. What should we do? Or like, my kid's got a fever. Or, the homeless guy who's just tired and wants a sandwich and calls you 3 times a day. And so when you first get out there, it's really weird. It's really jarring and it's really uncomfortable. And a lot of medics get really frustrated. A lot of medics get really sad and angry about it. And they're like, all these people are calling us for their BS. But then you do the job even longer and you start to realize that these are the needs that people have. And people are calling us because they don't have anyone else to call. They don't have anything else to do. And for whatever, political reason, most people in the States don't have a primary care doctor. They don't have easy access to medical services. They don't have a way to deal with their addiction, and they don't have anyone else to call. And so they call us, and we show up every time, no matter what. And there's frustration in that, but there's also honor in it. It means a lot. And what Mikey said, that passage where he talks about we are the make the problem go away button, that's actually the passage that inspired me to put so many testimonials from other medics in the book. Up until that point, it was kind of my narrative, and I was interviewing medics and using quotes from them.
Yeah.
But one part of the book, one of my very favorite parts, is I actually have whole sections that are told in other people's voices. Like there's these testimonials, voices from the field from other EMTs and paramedics. And it was literally Mikey in that interview, because he was so good at articulating it and his voice was so strong. And I was like, I don't want to quote Mikey. I want him to talk for a whole chapter. I want us to just listen to this guy, because it's such a good way to capture. And what he says there, he lists off all these examples and he says, call us whatever you want. We're the make the problem go away button. I think that's just such an incredible summary of one of the big themes of the book. When people don't know what else to do and when they don't have anyone else to call, they call us. And so our job ends up being, instead of just dealing with quote unquote real emergencies, our job ends up being this massive sweeping social safety net for like everyone in the US who doesn't have anyone else to call and doesn't know what else to do. Anytime somebody gets overwhelmed and doesn't know how to deal with their situation, they call us. And that ends up being the job. And so you're a therapist, you're a social worker, you're a mental health counselor, you're helping grandma put her groceries away because she doesn't have anyone else to call and she fell on the floor and her groceries are going to go bad if no one puts them in the fridge, And so it's not what I expected I was going to be doing.
Yeah.
But over time, I really learned to embrace it. It was like, well, this is what the job is. So let's try to be the best I can at doing this instead,
Right. Such a great point. I want to say hello to Nikki. Hello to you, Nikki, over on IG. Jacqueline Jones, hello to you. Leslie. Leslie's over on IG as well. Hello, Leslie. Bruce Marin, hello to you. For those of you guys on Amazon, appreciate the hearts over there. For those of you who are just tuning in, welcome. You all are watching Cyrus Webb Presents on Amazon, but we're simulcasting it on social. We're speaking with Joanna Sokol, discussing her number one new release on Amazon called A Real Emergency. We're going to also let you guys know, of course, how you can be able to get your own copy of the book if you're not joining us on the Amazon platform. You brought up the last thing I want to talk to you about, Joanna, and I thought about this because I've had the privilege of interviewing a lot of doctors, lawyers, social workers on this program. And I've been so fascinated by how a lot of them, especially over time, kind of equate their own worthiness and value to the world on what they do. What was that question like for you to think about as you were writing A Real Emergency? How much of your own self identity became part of the job?
Oh yeah, that's huge. Um, it's 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 the core part of who I am.
Mhm.
We all try really hard to not be somebody that's defined by our work. Oh,
Yeah.
there's more to me than what I do. I have hobbies, I do other stuff. But
Mhm.
I think for almost anyone who does this type of work, it's it's not realistic that I'm going to think of myself as anything other than a medic.
Mhm.
We were chatting pre-show about my sort of presence as an author and my website and my
Right.
social media, and I was laughing because I don't have any of that stuff because I still think of myself as a paramedic,
Yeah.
not as an author.
Right.
I'm always going to be a medic first.
Yeah.
And I try so hard to have other things in my life that define me so that I'm not just defined by my work.
Right.
I have hobbies, I surf, I garden, I do it, but it's all kind of BS on some level. Like I'm always going to be a medic first. It's who I am. It's how I see the world because it's such a big part um, of my identity. And I did have to step out of the field a little over a year ago now because of injuries and um, pretty much because of injuries
Yeah.
and focus. And I'm writing and I'm teaching now. I'm teaching EMTs and medics, and I love it. And it's a really really big transition. It's really weird for me to not wake up and put my boots on in the morning. I'm still
Right.
getting used to it, and it still doesn't feel quite right. And I'm trying to figure out ways that I can get back into the field, even though my back is totally screwed up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is a really big part of the identity, and I think we all try to have life outside of work, but when you do this work and you see the things we see and you're waking up crazy hours and you're working crazy hours and you're working nights and weekends and you're so surrounded by it, I think it's really hard to try to separate it and to not have it become a really big part of who you are.
Yeah. I think that's it. Did you find that A Real Emergency, Joanna, writing this book was something you needed for yourself too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
No, I 100% did this for myself.
Mhm.
I want it to be something that means something to other medics.
Right.
Um, I really hope, and I've gotten an incredible response so far from my friends, which is the thing that I was most worried about was the response of my peers,
Mhm.
of other EMTs and medics, and so far it's been very positive. But yeah, there's a lot of ego when you write a memoir.
Mhm.
There's a lot of like everybody cares about my stories, and so it was a really intense ride, but like I said at the very beginning, one of the things I've done since I was really young was keep journals and take notes. And
Right.
so after 14 years in this career, I felt like I was carrying around this story inside of me, and it was
Mhm.
becoming very heavy. I had all these stories and I had all these thoughts about what this work is and what it means and how we relate to the world and how to try to tell the world who medics are and all of these individual stories, funny stories and scary stories. And I felt like I was just carrying around with me this like heavy burden everywhere I went. And I wanted so badly to get it out of me.
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, the process of finally like purging all of this stuff I'd been carrying around um, was really intense, and it was very useful to me. I think I probably wrote 10,000 pages. I mean, it's so many memories and feelings and overwhelming parts of the job I just like dumped out. And
Mhm.
then it was just a process of sort of sifting through them and trying to figure out what we could use to try to um, put it together in a way that maybe will help some people,
Right.
hopefully, when they read
Yeah.
it.
Well, it definitely will. And the reason why I want to ask you that question, Joanna, because I think for all of our audience, I hope they realize this, that that their stories matter. And I was saying to
Yeah.
Joanna before we went live here that I think a book like this, I know myself in reading it, it makes you think about who's on the other side of that
Yeah.
phone or in that ambulance or, driving that police car, and thinking about the fact that they are a person too, and what they're having to do in order to do their job, and showing appreciation for that, not knowing everything that you have to deal with. And I think this book does a whole lot in giving a name and a face to that, so that we don't just think about it as a job, really think about it as a person. So I want to thank you on behalf of the rest of us
Thank you
for
so
writing
much.
for writing the book. Again, everyone, Joanna Sokol has been our guest. The book is A Real Emergency. Again, a #1 new release here on Amazon. You all can get it in print or get the Kindle edition here. You also can be able to go to her publisher website. I have it pulled up for you guys here as well. You can be able to go there to get more information about the book there on the publisher website from pinghamradhamhouse.com. And we'll make sure that we link that up as well for you guys too. Joanna, congratulations to you again. Really appreciate the time and looking forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you so much.
More than welcome. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Cyrus Webb Presents. Until next time, you all make it a great one. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.